Get ready, because you and I are about to see how I landed in juvenile detention for biting my bully's nose clean off. Yeah, I used to be the fat kid everyone tortured. At school, they beat me like a stray dog. And at home, my own father made sure my personal hell never ended. But juvenile prison was even worse. The guy whose nose I bit off had an older brother in there who ruled the whole sector like a king. From the moment I arrived, they turned my life into a humiliating public execution. They used me as a human stepping stone, dragged me through bathrooms, and even tried to drown me just for fun. Every single day they waited to see me break. But then, the most dangerous prisoner in the place started watching my every move. No one knew his past, and no one dared to look him in the face. But for some reason, he chose to teach me survival. He taught me how to fight, how to hunt, and how to become something even monsters are afraid of. Now, the whole prison freezes when they see me covered in blood. The bastards who treated me like garbage won't even look me in the eye because the weak kid they wanted to break is completely gone. And as I walk back to my cell through these silent hallways, the cold air always drags my mind back to the days before I became this monster. 5 years ago, I was just a chubby, easy target who hid himself extremely well in the back of the gym storage rooms. My life was basically a museum of pain controlled by a guy named Revik, a bored rich kid with psychopathic traits straight out of a true crime TV show. He would stare at me like some weird bug he wanted to pin to a wall. Watch closely here, the bastard was wearing metal knuckles, and when they slammed right into my ribs, my entire world instantly exploded into a blinding flash of red and white pain. The idiot actually complained that the metal broke when he hit me, like my bones were being rude. That was my damn city. A playground for predators where the law was a joke. You were either the hammer or the nail, and they hammered me deep into the dirt every day. Even outside of school, life was just one giant meat grinder. One day, I ran into 3 jerks using a kid as a human trampoline. A redhead locked eyes with me, and I didn't even wait to be threatened. I just handed over my wallet like I was his most obedient servant. Those geniuses were punishing him because of his brother. A family tax, they called it. Trust me, karma is coming for them. You and I are starting a story where whimpering a pathetic plea only made them laugh. I was just their entertainment. A walking reminder of being everyone's favorite prey. I would walk home, covered in fresh bruises, only to find another predator waiting in the living room. My old man spent his days drinking beer and running up debts, expecting my mother to pay them off with her own blood. Every time he slammed a bottle on the table, my heart stopped from sheer terror. I hid behind the door, covering my ears, begging forgiveness from the woman I was too afraid to defend. He called us dogs. The exact same word Revik used. It felt like the universe was throwing a giant, obvious hint at me. Now, watch closely with me as this paralyzing fear twists into something dark, tasting of hot, raw metal. My father was about to smash a bottle over my mother's head when I finally stepped out. I grabbed a simple box cutter, a tiny blade against a monster. I screamed that it was over. He just laughed, unbuckling his belt like he was about to discipline a small child. He had no idea he was stepping on a landmine. I lunged at him, but heroic moments have one major flaw. Panic makes you shake and completely ruins your aim. My attack was an absolute disaster. I failed to even scratch the monster. Instead, I stabbed the only person worth saving. I felt the metal sink deep into soft flesh. Opening my eyes, I saw my mother clutching her wound as her life slipped away. My father did not even flinch. I know what you're thinking, but he just mocked my terrible mistake. So I did the only thing a coward like me knew. I ran away. I left her alone with that vicious wolf. I wandered the streets like a ghost until I found a construction site and a stray puppy. For just a couple of hours, I truly believed I had found a real friend. Dawn arrived smelling of expensive coffee and pure evil. Revik caught me with the puppy and decided it was time to play his favorite game. He ordered me to bark and admit that I was nothing but a filthy stray dog. When the puppy showed more courage than me and bit his hand, Revik was mercilessly cold. He set his massive guard dog on my only friend. I had to stand frozen, watching that beast tear the life out of the only creature who ever fought for me. Revik walked over, reeking of raw contempt and cruelty, whispering that the weak have absolutely no right to protect anything at all. And trust me, that's where we leave off. He gave me 5 seconds to eat the remains or face horrific consequences. All right, you and I are about to witness the exact moment my mind completely broke, and trust me, nothing was ever the same. Get ready, because you and I are about to watch a weak kid turn into a monster. When his countdown ended, I went for him instead of the dog. I couldn't even fight. I used my teeth. I bit down on his nose and didn't let go until I tasted the metallic tang of blood and heard his cartilage snap. Seeing him squirm on the floor, crying for his mother, while his face turned completely red, was the first time I felt alive. But of course, the world never rewards you for defending yourself. The police didn't care about the bullying, and my own father accepted a fat stack of cash from Revik's family to shut his mouth. At 15 years old, they sent me into a 5-year nightmare. They actually thought they were punishing me. They had no idea they were sending me to the one place on Earth that could teach me to be the real monster everyone claimed I was. The sky was crying the day they dragged me to my new home, and honestly, I couldn't even blame it. As the rain soaked me, a guard used my back to test his baton's strength. He yelled at me to hurry up, as if I had somewhere better to go. It's actually hilarious. That intake room was an absolute masterclass in stripping away human dignity. Picture a bunch of us crouching on the freezing floor like broken umbrellas, while they barked orders at us like we were cattle. Then they ordered us to strip. There is nothing like standing naked and helpless before total strangers to make you realize you no longer own your body. When my turn came to say my name, now pay attention to this. My voice completely failed and I stammered, which felt like a personal insult to the guard writing down the names. He barked at me to speak up, but suddenly looked down at my file. A slow, nasty grin spread across his face. He recognized me. I wasn't just Kai anymore. I was the kid who bit off his bully's nose. He gave me a number and told me to memorize it. That was my new identity. Kai was dead now. I was just a digit in their registry. They hosed us down with freezing water to wash away our remaining dignity right before dragging us to medical checks and mugshots. When they lined us up in the hallway, I felt more like slaughterhouse meat than a person. Then the warden arrived, wearing a smile so fake and rehearsed it made me sick. I'm surprised he wasn't wearing a corporate logo. He stood right before us, claiming this place wasn't actually a prison. Yeah, right, it was a rehabilitation center. He said if we ever had any issues, his office door was always open. He probably spends his nights listening to teenage criminals cry while sipping on some expensive whiskey. He made sure to mention no girls were allowed, as if a lack of dates was the main concern for kids who just lost their freedom. He talked about giving back to society, but looking at the guards, it was obvious we'd only end up contributing patients to the local hospital's emergency room. You and I both know that special treatment in prison just means bringing your own bandages. The guard escorting me had a malicious grin that told me everything. He shoved me inside and the heavy door slammed shut, making my stomach drop. I looked around. Several guys were lounging on the bunks like they owned the place. One of them, sitting like a king on a throne of dirty laundry, demanded my name. I tried to be polite, but apparently, giving him my actual name was the worst mistake I could have made. He jumped down immediately, shoved a pencil right in my face, and screamed, demanding my number. He didn't wait for an answer before starting the welcome party. They didn't just beat me, they wanted to erase my entire existence. I curled up on the cold floor, protecting my vitals while they used me as a human welcome mat. The leader warned me I belonged to him now. No talking, no opinions, just absolute obedience. He taught me the hierarchy of the North Sector with a few well-aimed kicks. Filthy trash. That's what I was now. The absolute lowest form of life in this entire building. And as ultimate proof of my new status, they gave me my first official job, being their footstool. Look, the plumbing here is a joke, and the actual bathroom is only unlocked at certain times. The rest of the day, the sink is used for everything, but it's just too high up. That's where I came in. I had to get down on all fours so this guy could stand on my back to do his business. I'm not exactly a bodybuilder, and after the beating they just gave me, my muscles felt like absolute jelly. I started shaking. My hand slipped on the wet floor, and the king slammed face first right into the porcelain. The sound of his skull cracking against the sink was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard in my life. He stood up, screaming with blood in his eyes, promising to finish what my school bullies had started. I closed my eyes, whispered an apology to my mother, and waited for the end. But it never came. A bespectacled kid named Solon stepped in. He didn't use his fists, but his words. He was clever, reminding the boss why I was sent here, and that killing me night one would bring serious consequences. And trust me, it worked. All right, stick with me here. The boss left, leaving me with Solon, who gave me some ointment and advice I would carry like a weapon. Endure or die. There are no other choices. He explained that this place runs on a system so strict it makes the army look messy. Your will to survive is literally the only currency you have left here. The next day, during free time, Solon took me to the yard to show me how the food chain actually works in this place. I saw a guy named Zeth in the middle of a circle, like the eye of a storm. And some idiot decided to challenge him, and Zeth handled him with the casual grace of shooing a fly. He didn't just beat him, he sent him straight to another galaxy. I looked at the guards. They didn't even bother pulling out their batons. They just reached for their cigarettes, watching the fight like televised sports. Solon explained the rules. The prison is split into 4 sectors and power is the only law. If you can fight, you can lead. The guards let the strong rule just to keep the chaos under a strict sense of order. A perfect, violent ecosystem where Zeth crowned himself as the ultimate apex predator. Seeing Zeth walk away untouched and dominant woke something up in my mind. For once, I didn't want to just hide away. I craved that power. I wanted to become the feared monster instead of the victim everyone kept stepping on. Now, pay attention here, because reality hits hard. The next day in the cafeteria, you could literally cut the tension with a knife. A terrifying group of inmates marched in, led by Vero. The entire cafeteria went dead silent. My cell leader, the guy I knocked down earlier, ran over to greet him like a terrified little puppy. Vero didn't even bother looking at him. He walked straight to me, grabbed my shirt, and dropped a bomb that made my blood run cold. He was the older brother of the guy whose nose I bit off. Suddenly, my 5-year sentence felt like an absolute death warrant. Vero didn't hate me, I was just his property. He declared to the whole room that I belonged to him. And if anyone touched me, they would answer to him first. It sounded like protection, but I'm no idiot. He wasn't guarding me, he was saving me for dessert. He threw me onto the cold floor like trash, leaving me there while everyone whispered about how long it would take for Varro to completely break me. I looked at Solon as he helped me up, and I read it in his eyes. He didn't think I would survive a single week. I spent my afternoon doing my specialty, being the prison star janitor, scrubbing down the disgusting communal showers. The only sound was my rag scrubbing against the floor. Everything felt calm and safe, and that was my first massive mistake. You and I both know that after getting my life wrecked by Revik, I should have learned my lesson. But no, I let my guard down for 5 minutes. The door creaked, and Dragon, a massive bald beast, walked into the bathroom. A massive inmate who looked like he was built in a lab specifically to become every weak person's worst nightmare. He stared at me with a disgusting grin, calling me fresh, delicious meat. Seriously, If this prison system actually wanted to rehabilitate us, they should start by not locking us up with guys who look at us like raw steaks. He whispered he just wanted to play around. In here, playing usually means ending up in the infirmary covered in stitches. I tried to push him off, but my hand hit the handle, turning on the shower. Great job, Kai. Now I'm being cornered under freezing rain, and Dragon thought it was a romantic touch. He ordered me not to fight back, his eyes filled with a pure malice that made my skin crawl. When I tried to defend myself, he grabbed my head like a soccer ball and slammed it hard against the concrete wall. My vision went blurry for a second as I tasted that classic metallic flavor of blood. I was about to become a stain on the floor when Solon, my four-eyed savior, showed up. He didn't come in swinging. He simply spoke the name of the only man in this entire prison capable of freezing Dragon's blood, Varro. He reminded him I was Varro's property, warning that if he broke his favorite toy, he would face absolute hell. It was a strange feeling knowing that the guy who wanted to skin me alive was the only reason I was still in one piece. Dragon backed off, but not before issuing a deadly threat to my buddy Solon. Walking back down the hall with a splitting headache, I realized cleaning the bathrooms had actually been the easy part. The real challenge was getting back to my cell alive. Suddenly, the empty hallway turned into a complete death trap. Several inmates cornered me from both sides. They didn't even bother giving some dramatic villain speech. They went straight to beating me half to death on the floor, calling it a simple lesson. My punishment for surviving Dragon. I was curled up like a turtle when Dr. Vess appeared. Trust me, you and I just witnessed a wild ride. She is the prison doctor. Let me tell you, if not for her, half of us would be dead. She saved me with an inspection threat, but made it clear that this time, I just got lucky. Luck. If this is lucky, I dread to think what a bad day looks like. At the clinic, Dr. Vest was surprisingly kind. She warned me the disinfectant would sting, telling me there was no need to pretend I was not in pain. I sat there gritting my teeth so hard they almost shattered, insisting I was fine. Obviously, that was a flat-out lie. My ribs felt like they were held together by nothing but some tape and pure prayers. But I knew showing weakness in here is like bleeding in a shark tank. That night, the cell's silence felt incredibly eerie. It felt heavy. Solon never came back from his cleaning shift. My gut told me Drogon was finally making good on his previous threat. I started slamming the cell door, desperately yelling for a guard, but I only ended up waking our cell leader. That guy was absolute trash. A selfish, arrogant jerk who valued his precious sleep way more than another man's life. He kicked me and barked at me to shut up, completely ignoring my panic over Solon. He went right back to sleep while I lay there, staring at the shadows, feeling an impotence that was slowly turning into something dark. Now watch closely. Because the next morning, the entire block erupted into absolute chaos. I shoved my way through the crowding inmates, heart hammering against my chest, until I reached the showers. The guard tried to block us, but I saw everything. Solon was loaded onto a stretcher, his face so brutally swollen and bloody he barely looked human. The entire floor was stained red. Drogon just stood there, looking bored. He actually had the nerve to complain that Solon was somehow still breathing. Then he locked eyes with me. He figured since Solon was broken, it was time to find a new toy. Grabbing my arm, he dragged me to the back, promising that this time nobody would be around to save my skin. No thinking, no planning. I just did the one crazy thing that worked for me before. I bit him with everything I had, sinking my teeth into his hand, tasting his blood. My fear vanished for a second. He screamed, thrashing me in a rage and leaving me for dead. He was about to deliver a blow that would have ended my story right then and there, when a hand landed on his shoulder. It was Szeth. Drogon froze completely, and the room's temperature felt like it dropped 10 degrees. Szeth did not look angry, just annoyed. He ordered him to move so he could shower, radiating the vibe of the ultimate big brother. He treated the most dangerous guy in the entire block like a minor, irritating nuisance. He told Dunn the bathroom was filthy and ordered him to beat it. Dunn, the savage who was just stomping me, slunk away like a whipped dog because he knew fighting Zeth meant a permanent coma. Imagine being left alone with a guy who just casually wrecked 4 men at once. I had no idea what to say, so I just started cleaning. I watched him shower, moving with an effortless, quiet power. I realized even the worst monsters in here feared him. And damn, I wanted that exact power. I needed it desperately. I wanted to be like him, someone who never had to apologize just for breathing. He told me to get lost as soon as I finished. I did not argue, rushing to the cell to find Solon barely conscious. I sat beside his bunk, guilt utterly eating me alive inside. I begged his forgiveness for the blood, the pain, and for making him a target. Solon just gave me a weak, tragic smile. He insisted he was fine and that they treated him okay. Then he pulled out a photo, showing me his ultimate motivation. It was the same kid I saw getting bullied out on the streets, Solon's younger brother. Solon blamed himself, choosing to enter this living hell to protect him. He said I reminded him of his brother, smart but defenseless. I assured him his brother was doing fine and playing with friends. A total lie, but the only mercy I could offer. It worked, and I watched his body finally relax, but suddenly, his expression turned deadly serious. He pulled me close, desperately whispering a confession that this prison hides a terrifying, dark secret. Before he could finish, an inmate cut in with a crude joke about us. The heavy atmosphere was totally ruined. Solon warned me to keep my head down and meet in the clinic tomorrow. That night, I could only hear his agonizing coughs, a wet echo cutting through the pitch black. I remembered his advice about being patient, but my patience was completely gone. I stared at my hands and tried mimicking Zeth's fluid movements from the yard, throwing weak punches in the dark. It was pathetic, a chubby kid playing ninja, while surrounded by literal, cold-blooded murderers. Closing my eyes, I knew I could never be anyone's prey again. To save Solon and survive this place, just taking punches was not enough. Get ready, because I have to become the very monster I feared. Come along with me, because this trip to the infirmary felt like a funeral before knowing whose coffin it was. I carried Solon, feeling his entire weight heavy on my shoulders. Every single gasp he took sounded like a rusty hinge. He kept apologizing for the trouble, as if being savagely beaten by a pack of wolves was somehow his own fault. I told him to shut up and just breathe. The hallway should have been empty by now, but of course, the universe was not done playing with us. Out of the shadows stepped the warden, flanked by guards. He glared at us with that same fake plastic concern from his welcoming speech. He asked what was going on, acting like the blood smeared across Solon's face was just some messed up makeup. Solon, ever the diplomat, lied straight to his face without blinking. He claimed it was just an old wound. The warden played along, smiling with that oily grin that said, "I know you are lying, and I love it," before telling us to stay safe. Once they left, the air felt even colder. I asked Solon why he did not just expose that bastard dragon. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much and said that, "Here, rules do not matter, business does." He whispered about smuggling, explaining that this prison was actually a hub for items that should never exist behind bars. He confessed he planned to use this massive secret as his golden ticket to escape this hellhole. Now pay close attention here, because he was dealing in secrets bought with lead and graves. We finally made it to the clinic where Dr. Vess started patching him up. Everything was quiet for barely 5 minutes before the door was slammed open. 2 guards marched in like they were on a mission. They told Solon the warden ordered him transferred to an outside hospital and a car was already waiting. You would think a hospital visit is a relief, but the vibe shifted instantly. Solon's face turned completely pale. He did not want to go. Dr. Vess stepped in, grabbing a guard's arm and insisting she could treat him right there. The guard did not even look at her. He coldly warned that if she valued her job, she had better get out of the way. She let go. She had no choice. Solon looked back at me one last time, but it was not the look of someone getting medical help. It was the look of a man who knew he was being led straight to the gallows. He told me to stay patient. He said that in this God-forsaken place, nobody would defend me but myself. And then, he was just gone. I went back to my cell, trying to convince myself he would return in a few days after resting in a real bed with real medicine. I know you can already picture it, but the next morning in the cafeteria, reality shattered us. I was in line when I heard the whispers. Two guys were mocking some idiot from the West Sector who tried escaping last night and ended up smeared across a truck hood. My heart did not just sink, it stopped completely. The moment they said his name, Solon, my tray crashed loudly to the floor. The sound of plastic hitting concrete rang out like a gunshot. That was when Holt, the chief of guards, showed up. He stood right in the middle of the mess hall to deliver the boring official story. He claimed Solon attacked two guards, caused damage, and died instantly while escaping. It was the biggest load of corporate garbage I had ever heard. Solon could barely even stand, let alone take down two armed guards. They had not sent him to any hospital. They sent him on a permanent exit. I felt the pain, but the rage took over faster. I saw Dragon standing right near me. He had this smug, disgusting grin plastered on his face, even having the nerve to say it was a pity since he was not done playing with him. I did not think. I did not plan. I just lunged forward and threw a punch straight at his face with all my strength. But Dragon was not some ordinary bully. He was a professional. He dodged my clumsy swing like I was moving in slow motion, then planted a boot in my face that sent me rolling across the floor. He stood over me, crushing my chest with his foot, while laughing about how the little piggy wanted to play hero. He grabbed my shirt, lifting me up to deliver the final blow when suddenly, his arms froze in midair. Zith was there, not even yelling. He did not strike a pose. He just calmly pointed out his food had been spilled and asked how he planned to pay for it. He was so cold and casual that it made Dragon look like a kid shaking in absolute terror. Dragon's lackeys started muttering about whether to help, but none of them were stupid enough to trespass on Zeth's territory. Dragon tried to play it cool, acting like the bigger man by walking away, but everyone noticed the cold sweat running down his forehead. ZH looked at me and ordered me to head to the infirmary because that was exactly what Solon would have wanted. Dragon tried to block my way, but a single glance from Zeth completely cleared the path. Still, that idiot was not done digging his own grave. He yelled at Zeth, challenging him to fight like a real man. I watched, hypnotized. Dragon had been training, and he was fast and incredibly strong. He threw punches that would have turned my head into a red mist. But Zieth was barely trying. He was basically just dancing. He dodged every blow by inches. Trust me, you and I will never forget the absolute boredom on his face. All right, you and I are about to watch one of the most brutal prison survival stories. Dragon got desperate, lunged for an opening, but Zeth slipped back, dodging easily and slamming his elbow down with insane, bone-crushing force. Dragon slammed into the concrete floor, so hard I could feel it in my own teeth. He lay there, coughing blood, trembling, and unable to look Zeth in the eyes. That was the exact moment I finally understood the brutal reality of this hellhole. Power isn't a luxury in this place, it's the only language anyone actually speaks. A guard finally came to break them up, but the prison hierarchy had already been rewritten. Dragon crawled away, spitting a promise that when Varro gets out of solitary confinement in 1 year, I would be a dead man. But I didn't care about the future, only about surviving right now. Back in the infirmary, honestly, the sharp burn of the antiseptic is the only thing reminding me that I'm still technically breathing. Dr. Vess keeps droning on about my injuries, probably wondering why I keep coming back like some recurring nightmare. But I'm not even listening. I can only hear Dragon's greasy voice echoing in my head, promising that the big boss Varro is coming for my soul. 1 whole year. That is exactly how much time I have before they release him to erase me. It is a ticking countdown to a funeral where I am the guest of honor. When the door suddenly slams open and Zeeth walks in, the temperature in the room drops 20 degrees. He goes straight to the medicine cabinet, moving with a predatory elegance that makes everyone else in this place look like they're crawling through mud. Watch closely, he is leaving, without even noticing I am still breathing. I realize he's my only way out. I step right into his path. And I don't just ask, I throw my pride away and beg. I tell him straight I need to learn how to fight, and I have to survive at all costs. He glares at me like an insect he wants to crush just to see the mess it makes. He asks, why? So I give him my only honest answer. I tore off the nose of a monster's little brother, and now that monster is coming to finish the job. I repeat that I have to stay alive. I have to see my mother again. But Zeeth's response is simple. He tells me to get out of his sight. He has his own goals, his own demons to chase, and he doesn't plan to waste time babysitting a pig looking for an easy way out. He warns me that Vero is no ordinary bully. He is a hollow-eyed psychopath who has been killing people since high school, using his family's dirty money to dodge the consequences. Zeeth tells me that even if he taught me, I wouldn't have the stomach to handle it. He orders me to go back to my cell and wait for the end quietly. I return to the block feeling like a walking corpse. I thought I had already hit rock bottom, but then I see my cellmates. Those vultures didn't even wait for Solon's body to get cold before they started digging through his things. They're fighting over his clothes and trinkets like they're cheap garbage. And right then, I see it. Solon's photo, the only thing keeping him human in this absolute hell. One of the guys rips it right in front of my face, telling me I am completely alone now, and the only person who cared about me is 6 feet under. And right there, Kai died. I know what you're thinking, but something cold and sharp settled inside my chest. I didn't tremble, I didn't hide, I ran. I found Zeeth out in the yard. It was pouring, the kind of weather that makes everything feel like a funeral. And he was out there lifting heavy sandbags, as if trying to rebuild the entire world with his bare hands. Standing there soaked, I screamed that I didn't want protection anymore. I told him I was ready to endure whatever hell he put me through, just to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. He gave me just one condition, 1 hour, a massive mountain of sandbags. If I could move every single one before they locked the yard, he'd stop seeing me as a nuisance and start treating me like his student. I didn't hesitate. I just moved. I grabbed a bag, threw it over my shoulder, and ran. Every single step was a painful memory. Every heavy breath felt like flipping the bird to everyone who had ever dared to call me a coward. While I was suffering out there in the freezing mud, I didn't realize the world kept spinning right past me. In the visitation room, our noseless wonder, Revik, was throwing a massive tantrum, slamming a can on the table like a spoiled child. He wanted me dead immediately, but Vero, the older brother, is a completely different breed of monster. He has patience. He struck Revik across the face just to remind him that, in their world, you never act on raw impulse. He explained there is a war going on between the Korra and Koriyama gangs. Political garbage that I got dragged into, all because of Solon. Varo ordered him to wait. If people start dropping dead one after another, the authorities are going to get highly suspicious. He promised to let me live for exactly 1 year. A year of mental torture, a year of looking over my shoulder, turning my reality into an inescapable hell. He thinks he has all the time in the world. He thinks I'm still that weak kid he shoved down in the cafeteria. Back in the yard, my body was screaming. I had 15 sandbags left, and my muscles felt like they were being shredded by white-hot wires. Zeet watched me with unreadable eyes. I saw him turn away, and trust me, for a second, absolute despair almost swallowed me whole. I thought I disappointed him, and that he saw me as a failure. But stick with me, because this is where the ghosts of her past show up. I could hear Dragon laughing, and my father repeating that I was a disappointment, just like my mother was. I felt Revik's hand heavy on my shoulder, whispering in my ear to just give up, that I was completely worthless, whispering that the only thing I was good for was waiting to die. I could even hear my own past self mocking how pathetic I was. I snapped. I didn't just scream, I roared with pure rage at the shadows. I told them to shut up and started running. I wasn't just carrying sandbags anymore. I was carrying the weight of every single humiliation I'd ever endured. 10 bags total. 8, 5. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a caged animal, desperately clawing to escape. I went for the last 3, ready to lift them all or die trying. Suddenly, boom! A brutal blow. Zeth had hit me. A sharp, surgical strike that completely emptied my lungs and sent me face first straight into the mud. Gasping from the ground, I stared up at him, not understanding why he was stopping me when I was so close. He looked down at me with something almost like respect if he weren't such a cold bastard. He told me I'd hit my absolute limit. If I kept going, he warned, my heart would stop, delivering the exact death everyone predicted for me. I tried crawling back to the bags, telling him I wasn't done, that I had to keep going. He knelt down, touched my shoulder, and changed everything. Leave it to me, I'll make you the strongest. Now pay attention here, because right at that moment, my world went completely black. It wasn't just sleep. I sank into the very first peaceful darkness I had experienced in years. I was drifting in that deep slumber when a familiar face emerged from the shadows. It was Revik, looming over me, his voice echoing cold in the dark, whispering that he would finally finish the job he started back at school. I woke up screaming with all my might, shattering the quiet of the infirmary in a heart-wrenching way. Dr. Vess nearly jumped out of her skin. She looked at me with pity and annoyance, asking if it was really that bad. I didn't have to say a word. The door creaked open, and the entire atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Zeth walked in with that cold, I don't have time for your drama look. He glanced at the doctor and confirmed that yes, it was extremely serious. He carried this heavy, imposing presence just by standing there, and he wasn't about to waste any time. He ordered the doctor to get out, and she actually listened. What a wild world where a teenager bosses around a medical professional. But in a place like this, fear is the only language they truly understand. Once the door shut, Zeth came closer, explaining that to avoid the vultures, he'd pretend I was receiving ongoing medical treatment. Dr. Vess was in on it. She'd let us use the back storage room for our secret training sessions. We had to fly under the radar until I was ready. Clutching my thin bedsheet, I promised to give him absolutely everything. Zeth didn't offer any comfort or give me some cheesy, you-can-do-it motivational speech. I know what you're thinking, but he just told me those sandbags were a warm-up and that my willpower meant nothing. He left me alone with my thoughts, forcing me to realize that I was actually way more pathetic than I thought. When the doctor came back to change my bandages, I asked her the one question that kept spinning in my head. Who is Zeth, really? She looked taken aback, but then gave me a cold response. Sometimes it's better not to ask. She assured me he wasn't a bad guy, and that everything he did was ultimately for his family. Warning me to leave some mysteries buried, she sent me to the storage room. Stepping inside for the first time literally felt like leaping into a black void. It was pitch black. Zeth's voice echoed from a corner, explaining that blindness sharpens the senses. Sounds cool, until I realized I'd be slamming into walls for the next hour. He laid down the law. No talking about training, no questions, just complete and absolute blind obedience. Then came the evaluation, 1 minute on the clock. My task: squat jumps, push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups. I actually thought I was doing great, that the recent adrenaline rush had magically turned me into some warrior. I was dead wrong. Zeth read out my stats as coldly as a coroner performing an autopsy. 23 jumps, 30 sit-ups, 2 pull-ups, and the ultimate humiliation: 6 push-ups. I've seen babies with more upper body strength. My body was trembling, my lungs burning like hot coal, while Zeth just stared at me, sighing in disappointment. He said my earlier strength was just a desperate fluke, then gave me 3 days to double those numbers. I had the nerve to ask when we'd start martial arts. I wanted to break bones, not do basic gym class workouts. His response was a swift blow that nearly knocked me down. Trust me, you and I are in for one long ride. Picture this. A fist stops a single millimeter from your nose. He snapped that I would never dodge anything with my soft body, especially while hyperventilating. Get ready, because things are about to get intense. I asked for a 5-minute break, and he stared at me like I was asking for a luxury spa day. Talk about a brutal reality check, but I really needed it. He told me my sector leader did not look like a bodybuilder, but could do 70 push-ups in a single minute without sweating. 70. Then, there was Vero. Varro was a completely different kind of monster. A guy who had been taking lives since middle school and used his family wealth to hide the bodies. He warned me that if I did not find the strength to fight, I should just find a cozy spot to go die. That shut me up. I bowed, told him I wanted to live, and that was the moment my real hell began. Dr. Vest could hear Zeeth screaming through the walls. She knew he was pushing me, and that he was a total hypocrite. He called himself a lone wolf, but look at him, wasting his precious time trying to turn a pig into another wolf. By the end of the session, I was like a rag on the floor, my clothes so soaked with sweat they could fill a pool. ZH threw a pile of oversized clothes at me. He told me to use them to hide any changes in my build. The last thing we wanted was for the other inmates to notice that the prison's favorite toy was starting to bite back. Then he sat me down for a quick crash course on prison politics and the map of power. Now, pay close attention here, because Varro is not the only king in this castle. There are 3 other leaders, and on that exact day, they were meeting to discuss how to run this prison. Obviously, I wasn't there, but I can picture the scene, a table full of teenage sociopaths playing at being world leaders. On one side you have Braxton, boss of the South, a guy so cold he would kill you just to see how long your blood takes to freeze. Then there is Vale, from the West, who loves playing mind games and watching your reactions like you are some lab rat. And Varro, well, he was trying his best not to murder Braxton for mocking him. The tension in that room was thick enough to cut. Braxton was mocking Varro for losing complete control over his sector, basically telling him that if he could not control a pet like me, he should just retire. Varro exploded in rage and grabbed his throat desperately. Huge mistake. Braxton was not going to waste a single second talking. He simply smashed a glass bottle right into his face, shattering both his ego and the glass with lethal, surgical precision. They would have torn each other apart right there if the door had not burst open. In walked Dusk, boss of the East, the guy everyone whispers about but nobody truly knows. He is the undisputed apex predator of this entire prison. He broke them up like toddlers, telling them they were pathetic. And get this, he ordered that nobody touch Kai, not yet. It was not his time. Varro stayed quiet. But I know that look. It is the face of someone humiliated before all his rivals. He squeezed his glass until it shattered in his bare hand, letting the blood drip slowly onto the table. Once the others left, he gave a special order to his second, Kane. He could not kill me yet, but he could make me wish I was dead. He gave the green light to every piece of trash in the sector to use me as their personal punching bag. Back in the warehouse, Zeeth finished drawing the map. He said Dusk was the absolute strongest, a guy with no past who everyone feared. He explained that Dusk's only rule was peace. But if you broke it, the punishment waiting for you was absolute. I looked at my bruised hands, realizing that Varro's so-called protection was completely gone. It was officially hunting season. The bosses were playing chess while I was just a pawn ready to be sacrificed. Zeeth barked at me to get back to training. There was no time to rest or be afraid. I had to become the one factor that damn map could never predict. I had to be the glitch in their perfect, violent system. While I searched for my soul in that dark warehouse, Varro was smashing a subordinate's face into the floor. Phew! Then the order came. The one that turned my daily life into a nightmare of creative torture. Varro gave the green light to a guy named Kane. Remember that name. He is the ringmaster of this circus, and he was going to make sure I felt the full weight of their hospitality. Kane is not the type to get his hands dirty if he can hand off the cruelty to a dozen bored inmates. It all started in the showers. My muscles were already completely destroyed from Zeeth's beating, feeling as tight as rusty piano wires. Suddenly, the showers hissed open on their own. Ghosts in the pipes? No, just predators lurking among the tiles. Before I could even react, my world collapsed. My head slammed against the wall with a loud bang that sounded like a gunshot. They didn't want to talk. They wanted to keep me hydrated, dragging me to a bucket of water with cold, casual indifference. I was busy counting bubbles underwater, wondering how long a human can survive without oxygen. And trust me, you and I are about to see that this was only the warm-up. Hours later, I am quietly standing in the laundry room, but you and I already know things are going south. Watch as they clean up our main character. Two massive guys stuffed me inside an industrial washing machine like a sack of dirty laundry. I still hear the heavy metal door clicking shut right before the freezing water started rushing in. I banged on the glass begging for mercy while they laughed outside like it was some sitcom. The other inmates just stared. They knew the rules. No killing, just breaking my spirit. By the time I crawled into the cafeteria, I was a walking bruise. I did not even get to taste the mystery meat before they dumped a hot tray of boiling soup right on my face. The burning broth was actually a relief compared to feeling a heavy boot grinding my head against the cold concrete. They mocked my desperate gasps for air, laughing and telling me to eat up to grow strong. The guards simply looked away, only intervening to tell me to stop causing trouble and go to the clinic. A perfect cycle of pure misery. Back in the clinic, Dr. Vest stared at me like some unsolved riddle. She asked if I had a plan, and honestly, I had no idea what to do next. But Zeth was leaning against the cabinet with that cold, knowing look. He told the doctor this beating was bound to happen. He called being a punching bag a privilege. Crazy logic, but he wanted my victim phase to turn me into a combat scientist. He warned me to stop flinching if I wanted to win, and keep my eyes on the fists. I had to read their dropped shoulders, their shifting hips, and the eye twitches before they launched a hook. I could either remain a joke, or let this relentless humiliation build something truly terrifying deep inside my chest. So we headed back to the warehouse, but this time the mad scientist phase officially started. Zeth threw punches right at my face, restarting whenever I blinked. He said closing your eyes during a fight invites an early funeral. As we wrapped up training, and Zeth started getting dressed to leave, he gave Dr. Vess one final order to prep my eye drops, and they were not for redness. They forced my eyes to stay wide open, meaning I got beaten to a pulp while chemically unable to blink. It was a total psychedelic trip of pure agony. When they kicked my ribs at lunch, I stared right at their feet. I was finally tracking their rhythm and patterns. It was painful, but that chaotic blur of violence was slowly turning into high-definition data. Then, the yard atmosphere suddenly shifted. The regular bullies backed off as a dangerous new player entered the arena, some psycho named Scar. Pay attention here, because the guards gave their usual warning, but it was clear they only did it for paperwork. Scar went by a blood-chilling nickname, the Collector. He was not the strongest prisoner, but definitely the most twisted. He loved choking his victims unconscious, only to slice off a little piece of them as a sick trophy, an ear, a finger, whatever fit inside a glass jar. He walked up to me smiling, claiming he wanted my left eye next. He sneered that if I did not answer him right away, he would take my silence as a yes. The entire yard instantly transformed into a crazy betting house. Everyone threw down cigarettes and food, betting how fast the Collector would claim his next trophy. Then, Scar lunged at me. I dodged on pure instinct, scratching his chest with my nails. He paused, sniffed his own blood, and decided to get serious. He kept charging like a wild whirlwind of flying claws and gnashing teeth. I know what you are thinking, but thanks to Zeth's torture drops, I never blinked, catching his predictable attack pattern. If he missed, he would reset and repeat the exact same move. He only had one lethal trick. I decided it was time to make my own bet. He lunged for my throat again. I felt my glasses fall and shatter against the pavement, but I did not need them to see his massive defense gap. I stepped in and unleashed a punch fueled by the boiling soup and every spin inside that washing machine. The heavy crunch of my fist slamming into his jaw was the most satisfying thing I had ever felt. Scar crashed to the ground, but I was not done. I got on top, smashing his face into bloody pieces. The entire yard fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the cold concrete. The fat coward had just destroyed a monster. Shock rippled through their faces as all the bets completely flipped. Trust me, they actually thought I was using cheat codes. They didn't get that I was just a regular guy who learned not to blink. I stood up, wiped my blood, and saw Zeth. Stick with me, because this story is about to get wild. He didn't celebrate, he just stared. Let's see how this kid finally stops being just another nameless number in the system. I became an unsolved problem for them. And the money? Completely gone. The debt collector was totally done for. I was just getting started, sitting in the infirmary, smiling like I'd won the lottery. Dr. Vez wasn't sharing my joy. She smacked me, pointing out that in any normal world, I'd already be a corpse. I didn't care. The only thing hurting more than the bruises was seeing my mom's glasses crushed into broken plastic on the floor. Suddenly, the vibe shifted. The air grew heavy the moment Zeth walked in. I stood up immediately, bowing to him like he was a king. Because in my world, he was. He was shaping the monster I was becoming. No congratulations, no trophies. Staring with his usual cold indifference, he said I'd only beaten the weakest link, a guy more used to torturing than actually fighting. He warned me that real enemies lurk in the shadows. If I wanted respect, I had to stop playing the victim and become a rabid dog. He handed me a small box, a victory prize. Now, pay close attention here. He gave me contact lenses. No more easy four-eyed target, just a much-needed tactical upgrade. But Dr. Vess had another surprise waiting. She handed me a sealed plastic container. When I opened it, the smell hit me instantly. Spicy rice cakes. My mother's recipe. I'm not ashamed to say I burst into tears. I sat there devouring the food, savoring the only real memory of home in this concrete prison hell. Turns out, Zeth wasn't just some fight instructor. The guy was a genuine master of psychological warfare. He'd asked the doctor to prepare this before my clash. He didn't just expect me to win, he bet on it. He knew surviving tomorrow's training took more than muscle. I needed a real reason to keep my heart beating. While I enjoyed that priceless meal, the rest of the prison was reacting to the absolute earthquake I'd just caused. Over in a dark corner of the north sector, Dunn was literally using Scar's head as a footrest, screaming at him for losing to a pig like me. Scar just chuckled through broken teeth, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying new obsession with my potential. Vero watched the entire bloodbath through a cloud of cigarette smoke. He definitely wasn't laughing. He told his commander, Kane, to keep a close eye on me. He wanted to know if my win was pure luck or if a predator was growing in their backyard. The very next day? Let's face it, the honeymoon was officially over. Zeth met me in the warehouse with a new routine. Combat techniques and the art of falling without dying. It wasn't about raw willpower anymore, it was pure mechanics. Punching me straight in the gut, he kept shouting to tighten my core to protect my organs. Choking me out, he forced me to hold my breath until I nearly passed out. That's how he taught me the golden moment. He explained that when you're suffocating, time stretches out and your senses go completely numb. The exact second you gasp for air, your body freezes up. According to him, that brief second is the perfect time to kill. He made me memorize Dr. Vess's anatomical skeletal charts, giving me X-ray vision. I didn't see ordinary people anymore. I saw the third rib, the fourth vertebra, and the lateral ligaments. He taught me the knee strike, a move designed to splinter human joints like firewood. I trained until I shattered the heavy pads. I worked out non-stop until the fat melted off, replaced by rock-solid muscle. I wasn't that chubby warehouse kid anymore. I became a living weapon in a prison uniform. Finally, Zeth looked at me and said the word I craved. Excellent. Tossing me a roll of hand wraps, he handed me my first real mission. If I wanted to be a rabid dog, I had to start at home. I had to take down the boss of my own cell block. He didn't care if I lost, as long as I used his combat science. I walked back to my cell, feeling the thick tension hanging in the air. My cellmates were already there, and one of them was lying on my bunk like he owned the place. I asked what he was doing on my bed. He laughed, saying he just borrowed it. I pulled back the blanket and saw what they did. They had thrown filth and trash all over the bed where I slept. The cell boss walked over, throwing his arm around my shoulder with that fake, slimy attitude he loved. He claimed we're all men and to thank him for protection. But you and I know what's next. No talking, no complaining. I simply slammed my elbow straight into his face with surgical precision. Trust me, I didn't even flinch while dodging her incredibly clumsy strike. Get ready, because you and I are about to watch our main character crush the very hand that humiliated him and claim his power. His hand was completely shattered from the impact. The sickening crack of bone breaking left the entire cell in absolute silence. He screamed in desperation, swearing he would destroy me, but he was already fighting a ghost. I slammed a punch into his shoulder, pinned him to the wall, and drove a knee straight into the ligaments I studied. I felt them tear apart as his joint collapsed. But I did not stop there. I wrapped my leg around his neck, took him down, and drove my elbow into his spine as he coughed up blood. His little lackeys tried to step in, but seeing this absolute slaughter froze them. One held a pot, ready to strike. But the moment I stared him down, he suddenly decided he was just passing through. The boss tried to pull a sharpened brush from his sock, a pathetic, desperate attempt at a surprise attack. He managed to graze my shoulder, but it was his last mistake. I grabbed his wrist and told him who dies tonight. I delivered a heavy blow to his shoulder, watching his weapon fall before choking him out. I am the boss now, I whispered in the quiet cell. The guard passed by 10 minutes later, calling for lights out. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at my bloody knuckles and realizing that against all odds, I had actually won. My cellmates scrambled around. Pay close attention here, because long-haired Thorn warned me that drawing attention to myself was extremely dangerous. He said the old boss would seek revenge, and from now on, everyone would be looking to crush me completely. I did not care. I laid my head down and slept with the calm peace of a true apex predator. But while I slept, rumors spread like wildfire. Over in the north sector, Kane heard the news and realized this pig was finally showing his fangs. Down in the south, Braxton laughed out loud, betting that Varro was already losing his mind. In the west, Vile found the news quite interesting, quietly planning how he could use me. And, in the east, Dusk, the ultimate predator, closed his book and looked out the window. He knew this was no coincidence. It was the start of a war. The cafeteria felt completely different the very next morning. Usually, the air was heavy with burnt oatmeal and despair, but today the room was thick with pure curiosity. I sat alone, feeling 1,000 whispers on the back of my neck. It was not like when I beat up that debt collector. Before, I was just a weird glitch in the system. Now, I was a real threat with an actual rank. I know what you and I might think it is just a prison, but in here, that is like becoming king of the landfill. To these scumbags, I had just officially joined the high society of the yard. I was halfway through my mystery meat stew when a shadow covered my tray. Vale, boss of the west sector. He did not come with brute force like Varro. He had the sleazy, cheap confidence of a used car salesman. He sat down like we were old buddies, acting surprised that Vero had not turned me into a rug yet. He did not waste time. He whispered a deal to me that smelled worse than the cafeteria food. He wanted me to be his spy, his eyes and ears in the North Sector, in exchange for protection. A classic deal with the devil, pitching it as a win-win for both. Acting like keeping me safe was child's play for a big shot. Looking at him, I felt a wave of absolute clarity. I told him no and decided to rub salt in the wound. If he needed an outcast like me, he was just as isolated. A real leader does not need to recruit meat shields from the basement of his rivals. I asked him what he would do when Vero's guys finally caught me. Would he jump into the crossfire or just watch from afar? Vale did not like that one bit. His friendly mask slipped, and he slammed the table so hard it silenced the plastic spoons across the entire hall. He stood up, wished me a happy funeral, and walked off. The whispers turned into a roar. To the inmates, I was no longer just a lucky pig, but an arrogant one, and they hated it. The crying fat guy was talking to the yard gods, and everyone was betting on how epic my downfall would be. Walking down the hallway, I had my second real encounter. Dusk, the absolute boss of the East Sector. He did not even need to speak to show his sheer power. He stood there while a guard lit his cigarette like a butler. Trust me, you and I are just getting started with this prison war. Get ready, because you and I are about to dive into a brutal story. Dusk looked at me, said it was an honor, and blew out some smoke, a terrifying reminder of the mountain I had to climb. They weren't just kids, they were massive institutions. I was so lost in my own thoughts, calculating my chances of survival, I completely missed the brick wall standing right in the hallway. I bumped right into a guy and immediately apologized out of pure reflex. Old habits die hard. But he didn't budge. This was Kane, the Northern Sector commander, the guy who truly ruled VAR. He glared at me with cold, professional hatred. He reminded me that the cell boss I just crushed worked for him. I had humiliated him. I made their precious hierarchy look weak, and in here, reputation is absolutely everything. I saw the look in his eyes and knew this mad dog was about to get a major reality check. I braced myself, heart hammering. Now, pay attention here, because I never saw this coming. Kane didn't even fight me. Instead, he let his two lackeys do the talking with their fists. I had trained solely for one-on-one fights, believing that if I saw a punch coming, I could dodge it. But you can't dodge a blindside. As I blocked the first guy, the second swept my legs. Before I could even look down, a fist slammed into my temple. It was a masterclass in coordination. They moved as one, striking me from angles I didn't even know existed. I ended up face down on the cold floor, tasting blood, and the bitter truth that I was still just trash to them. Kane stood over me, looking down on the useless brat who thought he was special. He sneered that even if I beat some weak boss, trash is still trash. He promised to make my life highly entertaining before walking away, leaving me shivering on the ground. I wiped the blood from my mouth, feeling the gap between us like a physical abyss. Zetas had taught me how to bite, but he never taught me how to fight off an entire pack of wolves. I limped back to my cell, desperate for some peace, but what I found there shattered my soul even further. The former cell boss, the guy I had absolutely crushed, was sitting by the sink, shivering under a thin blanket. I wanted to say something, to offer him some dignity, but I stopped. How do you apologize for winning in a place that demands you lose? Then, the vultures arrived. A cellmate who used to cower in the corner walked right up to the ex-boss and ordered him onto all fours. He wanted to use the sink, demanding his human stepstool back. The old boss tried to snap back, asking who the hell they were talking to, but a brutal punch silenced him mid-sentence. Thorn, the long-haired snake of the cell, sneered that he was nothing but an outcast now. And this is easily the most pathetic thing you and I could ever witness. The man I defeated, who once ruled with an iron fist, gritted his teeth and dropped to the ground. He accepted it, becoming mere furniture. I couldn't stand watching it. I grabbed the kid trying to climb onto his back, shoved him across the room, and barked at him to stop. I warned them that as long as I was boss, that stepstool rule was dead. I thought I was being a hero. I believed I was bringing justice to this cell, but Thorne just laughed in my face, calling me an idiot. And the worst part? The ex-boss agreed. He glared at me with pure venom, telling me to stay out of his business. He preferred being a stepstool over accepting pity from a rookie. He spat that he'd be the one laughing in the end. I stood there, paralyzed, as the other inmate climbed onto his back and began to laugh. I won the rank, but changed absolutely nothing. I just inherited a broken world, so I fled to the only place that made sense, the warehouse. I slammed my fists into the punching bag, my knuckles bleeding, my mind a complete mess of conflicting rules. I wanted to wipe out the corruption, but the victims themselves were desperately clinging to it. Dr. Vest walked in, stopping my spiral with a clean towel and some news. Zeeth was gone, dealing with stuff that left him in a terrible mood. I poured my heart out, confessing that I couldn't understand why people would choose humiliation over change. She gave me a tired, knowing look before dropping a harsh truth on me. Logic simply doesn't exist here. These people only understand strength. To actually change the rules, being a mere cell boss wasn't going to cut it. I had to rule this entire damn sector. To reach that level, she told me to drop the average effort and train 1,000 times harder. I told her I wanted to learn from Zeeth, because I needed to know how to fight off a crowd alone. That's when the doctor showed me her true strength. Her secret was incredibly simple. Hit, run, and keep moving. You lure them in, build up their confidence, and drop them one by one. Before I could even register it, she lunged. 1 second she was leaning against the wall, and the next? Trust me, her hand was a blur inches from my eyes. Now pay attention, because she moved faster than Zeeth ever could. Just think about it. The very woman curing my painful wounds could easily end me in a single heartbeat.